It began like any ordinary family gathering. A warm invitation, a home-cooked meal, the chance to reconnect over food and laughter. In the small town of Leongatha, Victoria, Erin Patterson welcomed her relatives into her home on July 29, 2023. On the menu was a dish meant to impress. Beef Wellington, wrapped in golden pastry, filled with mushrooms, rich flavors, and the promise of comfort. But behind the carefully plated servings, something deadly was lurking. Something so toxic, so unforgiving, that by the end of the weekend, 3 people would be dead, and 1 would be fighting for his life. Erin was 50 years old, known in her neighborhood as a competent cook, a mother raising children in the quiet countryside. To the outside world, she seemed like any other suburban woman. But inside her family, tensions had been growing for years. She was estranged from her husband, Simon Patterson, yet still connected to his family. His parents, Don and Gail, and their sister, Heather Wilkinson, along with Heather's husband, Ian, a well-loved local pastor. Though the marriage had collapsed, Erin extended a hand of hospitality, inviting them to her home. To some, it looked like an olive branch, a chance to repair strained bonds. The guests arrived on that chilly Saturday, unaware that this meal would become one of the most infamous in Australian history. Each person sat down at the table, each plate carefully prepared by Erin. She served the Beef Wellington, a meal that had taken time, attention, and effort. Her guests dug in, smiling, savoring. Nothing seemed out of place. No one suspected that the mushrooms inside were not ordinary button mushrooms or gourmet varieties from the market. They were something far more sinister, Amanita phalloides, known around the world as the death cap mushroom. The death cap is one of the most toxic substances known to man. Just a single mushroom is enough to destroy a liver. Its toxins survive heat, survive cooking, and attack the body in cruel stages. First come the waves of nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Then, a false recovery, the body seems to stabilize, giving hope. But inside, the liver and kidneys are shutting down cell by cell. Within days, the damage becomes irreversible. Without a transplant, death is almost certain. Erin's guests had no idea that this was the fate awaiting them after their lunch. By the following day, the first symptoms appeared. All 4 guests were violently ill, rushed to hospitals as their conditions deteriorated. At first, doctors suspected food poisoning, perhaps a bacterial infection. But the symptoms were too severe, too specific. Then the truth emerged. This wasn't ordinary contamination. It was mushroom poisoning, and not just any mushroom, the deadliest kind. Don and Gail Patterson, both in their 70s, suffered catastrophic liver failure. Heather Wilkinson, only in her 60s, followed the same path. By August 4th, all 3 were gone. Only Ian Wilkinson, Heather's husband, clung to life. He was airlifted to Melbourne, placed in intensive care, and later received a liver transplant. He survived, but only after weeks of agony. As the community grieved, suspicion turned to Erin. After all, she had cooked the meal. How had she survived? Why were her children not present at the table? Why was Simon, her estranged husband, invited but absent? And why, as police soon discovered, did Erin own a food dehydrator, later found discarded at a local dump? Investigators began piecing the puzzle together, and what they uncovered sent shockwaves through the small town. They found evidence that Erin had searched online about death cap mushrooms, reading about their effects, their toxicity, and their resemblance to edible varieties. Witnesses came forward, saying Erin had told relatives she was battling cancer, a claim prosecutors later said was fabricated. That lie explained why her children weren't at the lunch. They'd been kept away, perhaps deliberately shielded. Even stranger, forensic experts noted that Erin's story about her own illness after the lunch didn't align with medical evidence. The dehydrator became a key piece of evidence. Prosecutors alleged Erin had used it to prepare or dry the mushrooms before cooking, then tried to destroy it when her guests died. Why would someone discard a kitchen appliance in such haste, unless it carried secrets too dangerous to keep? As the case unfolded, Erin insisted she never meant harm, that it was all a tragic accident, a terrible misunderstanding. She claimed she too had eaten the meal and fallen ill, though police were skeptical. Investigators suggested she may have served herself a different portion, carefully avoiding the poisoned servings she gave to her guests. The media swarmed the town, dubbing her the Mushroom Cook. Headlines across the world painted her as a manipulative woman who used food as a weapon. The tragedy wasn't just shocking because of the deaths. It was shocking because of the betrayal. These weren't strangers. These were family, grandparents, a pastor's wife, people who trusted Erin enough to sit at her table, eat her food, and put their lives in her hands. In the months that followed, detectives built their case. They gathered toxicology reports, traced her online history, and analyzed the sequence of events. And finally, Erin Patterson was charged with 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. The community was stunned. How could a simple lunch in a quiet town spiral into one of the most infamous murder trials in Australian history? But the story doesn't end there, because when the trial began, new secrets surfaced. Experts testified about the silent, ruthless power of the death cap mushroom. Prosecutors presented the dehydrator, the phone searches, the false claims. And Erin, sitting in court, showed little emotion as the evidence stacked higher and higher. The question loomed over the courtroom. Was Erin Patterson a careless cook who made a fatal mistake, or a calculating killer who used the world's deadliest mushroom to get rid of her in-laws once and for all? And just when the world thought it had the answer, the trial revealed something that no one expected. Something that would leave the courtroom in stunned silence. The courtroom in Melbourne was packed. Journalists, grieving relatives, and curious onlookers filled every seat, waiting to see how the case of the so-called Mushroom Cook would unfold. For weeks, whispers had circled through the town of Leongatha, growing louder with every headline. Was Erin Patterson a tragic figure caught in a deadly accident? Or was she a calculating murderer who poisoned her family on purpose? From the very beginning of the trial, the prosecution made its position clear. They weren't here to prove an accident. They were here to prove intent. With grim precision, they laid out their case. Erin's online searches about the death cap mushroom, her sudden purchase and disposal of the dehydrator, and the fact that her estranged husband Simon, the man she was perhaps most at odds with, was conveniently absent from the lunch. It all painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. The jury leaned in as prosecutors described the mushroom itself. Amanita phalloides, nicknamed the death cap, deadly in even the smallest dose. A mushroom so poisonous that its toxins can withstand heat, survive the oven, and slip undetected into even the most elegant meal. A mushroom responsible for countless deaths around the world. And now, prosecutors said, 3 more lives added to its tally, by Erin Patterson's own hands. As prosecutors spoke, the surviving victim, Ian Wilkinson, sat in court, frail but resolute. He had been through the worst pain imaginable. A sudden illness that tore through his body, the loss of his wife Heather, the deaths of his close friends Dawn and Gail Patterson. His liver had failed. His body had nearly shut down, and yet he survived just barely. His testimony was heartbreaking. He recalled sitting at Erin's table, laughing, chatting, enjoying the meal, never once suspecting the danger on his plate. Hours later, he was vomiting uncontrollably, his insides burning. He remembered the hospital lights, the doctors whispering in the hall, the words liver transplant and critical condition. Ian's presence in the courtroom was a living reminder of what the other 3 could not tell. He looked across the room at Erin, the woman who had cooked for him, and shook his head in disbelief. His testimony left the gallery in silence. But the defense wasn't finished. Erin's lawyers painted her as misunderstood, a woman who had endured years of marital breakdown and depression, but who never intended harm. They claimed she, too, had fallen ill after eating the meal, proof that she hadn't knowingly poisoned her guests. They argued that the mushrooms could have come from a mix-up at the grocery store or from contaminated ingredients. They insisted the prosecution's theory was circumstantial. No one had seen her deliberately add death caps to the dish. Still, the evidence against her piled higher. Investigators testified about her phone, which contained searches for death cap mushroom effects and how to cook mushrooms safely. Detectives revealed she had lied about her medical history, telling some relatives she had cancer, when in fact, she had not. Why lie about cancer? Why keep her own children away from the lunch, if not to protect them from danger? The dehydrator became another nail in the coffin. Police revealed they had recovered it at a local tip, abandoned by Erin shortly after the deaths. Forensic scientists explained how mushrooms could be dried, stored, and rehydrated for cooking, a process that could disguise their origin and make them easier to blend into a dish. When asked why she disposed of it, Erin had no convincing answer. The judge watched as the puzzle pieces connected into something chilling. The courtroom buzzed with speculation. Was this about revenge? Had Erin targeted her in-laws as a way of punishing Simon? Had she planned for Simon to be there that day, and was his absence the only reason he survived? Or was there something even darker beneath the surface? The tension rose when prosecutors read excerpts from Erin's police interviews. In one, she broke down, insisting she had done nothing wrong, crying that she loved her family, that she was being unfairly judged. But in another, her story shifted, contradictions about where the mushrooms came from, inconsistencies about how sick she herself had been. To the jury, it looked like deception. To the press, it looked like guilt. Then came the most explosive testimony of all. A digital forensic expert stepped forward with data retrieved from Erin's laptop. Among her search history was a disturbing series of queries, not just about mushrooms, but about poisons in general. The jury gasped when the expert read them aloud. How to disguise toxins, poison symptoms timeline, plants that can kill silently. Each search was time-stamped, each one placed before or after key moments in the lead-up to the deadly lunch. The defense scrambled, arguing that searches didn't prove intent, that anyone could stumble across strange information online. But the damage was done. The image of Erin Patterson had shifted from unlucky cook to potential killer with a plan. Still, the prosecution wasn't finished. They had one more piece of evidence, something no one had expected. They revealed that investigators had interviewed Simon Patterson, Erin's estranged husband. Simon had fallen mysteriously ill the year before, with symptoms eerily similar to mushroom poisoning. He survived after weeks in hospital. At the time, no one suspected foul play. But now, in the shadow of the mushroom murders, detectives began asking new questions. Had Erin tried before? Was the mushroom lunch the first attempt? Or just the one that succeeded? The revelation shook the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Relatives gasped. Erin shifted in her seat, eyes darting, her hands gripping the table. And just when the gallery thought they had heard everything, the prosecution hinted at even more hidden layers. Details they claimed would expose Erin's true motive, secrets she had guarded for years. But what they revealed next would leave the entire courtroom in stunned silence. Comment below and follow for part 2. The revelation about Simon Patterson's mysterious illness the year before had changed everything.